It's January 19th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the UN Security Council's closed-door meeting on North Korean issues. Mounting threats from North Korea topped the talks at the informal meeting, including the regime's claim of a solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile launch, as well as its growing antagonism against the South. Thursday's meeting solely on North Korea was the first of its kind in 2024. The U.S. will continue with attacks on the Houthis, U.S. President Joe Biden says. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he told the U.S. that he's against the establishment of a Palestinian state once the Gaza war comes to an end. The Winter Youth Olympics kicks off in South Korea's Gangwon province tonight for what is its largest edition ever and also the first time hosted in Asia. Over 1,800 athletes representing nearly 80 countries are in Gangneung for the winter competition. Members of the UN Security Council gathered in New York on Thursday for talks on North Korean issues for the first time this year. And among the discussions during the closed-door meeting were the regime's recent solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile launch and its clear arms deals with Russia. Our Choi Soo-hyung starts us off.
The United Nations Security Council met in New York on Thursday local time to discuss North Korean threats in the new year. This comes as South Korea, a non-permanent member of the Council, has requested international cooperation against the North security threats. Other countries such as the US and Japan also requested the meeting, which focused on North Korea and non-proliferation. In the meeting, the members discussed the regime's recent threats to Seoul and the international community, as well as the North Korea's launch on Sunday of an intermediate-range ballistic missile. South Korea emphasized that the North nuclear policy has changed in the last 2 or 3 years, so the Security Council should react not only by focusing on ballistic missiles launched by North Korea, but rather all types of security threats that harm international peace and safety. After the meeting, South Korea's UN ambassador Hwang Jung-guk said in-depth discussions took place. South Korea and the U.S. urged the Security Council to break its silence, mentioning that Kim Jong-un, the leader of the regime, had declared a hostile relationship between Seoul and Pyongyang. However, experts say it may be challenging to reach an agreement on North Korean matters due to the current Security Council divisions. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
And following North Korea's persistent provocations, top nuclear chiefs of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan convened a meeting here in Seoul on Thursday. The three sides warned the North its course of action would only hurt itself. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji reports.
The nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan met in Seoul to discuss issues on North Korea amid heightened tensions in the region. Seoul's nuclear envoy Kim Gun said Pyongyang's version of a closed-door policy will only hurt itself and called on the regime to return to talks.
We call on North Korea to immediately stop provocations, lift its self-imposed ban on talks, and come back to the path of denuclearization, peace, and prosperity.
His remarks come as North Korea fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile on Sunday, which could be capable of targeting U.S. military bases in Guam or Japan. The North later claimed that this was a successful test launch of its solid-fuel missile carrying a hypersonic warhead. During the trilateral talks on Thursday, the U.S. nuclear envoy also criticized the North for unnecessarily raising tensions.
The United States is also deeply concerned by the recent uptick in hostile rhetoric, particularly toward the Republic of Korea, from the DPRK regime. Such rhetoric is unnecessarily increasing tensions on the Korean Peninsula.
Thursday's meeting was just a day after the North Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee visited Moscow, where she met Russian President Vladimir Putin and discussed enhancing bilateral relations in all areas, including what Russia called sensitive ones, which could mean military cooperation.
The transfer of these weapons and related material flagrantly violate the multiple UNSC resolutions and supports Russia's war of aggression. We also need to closely monitor what Russia might provide to North Korea in return for for these arms exports.
The U.S. and its allies have accused Russia of using North Korean missiles in its war on Ukraine. And officials from Seoul and Washington have said North Korea is supplying munitions to Russia for use in its war against Ukraine in return for satellite technology. Arirang News.
A senior U.S. official predicts that the recent growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia will dramatically increase Pyongyang's threats in Northeast Asia over the next 10 years. The White House National Security Council's senior director, Pranay Vadi, during a discussion session hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies on Thursday, cited how Pyongyang-Moscow military cooperation was reaching unprecedented levels. Meanwhile, in a press conference following a NATO military committee meeting in Brussels, the committee's chair, Admiral Rob Bauer, said Russia has recently increased missile production while receiving missiles from North Korea. He added that NATO also expects Russia to receive missiles from Iran. U.S. President Joe Biden says his country is yet to end airstrikes against the Houthis as the rebel group continues its attacks in the Red Sea. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once again reiterated his opposition to the creation of a Palestinian state in any post-war scenario. Lee Seung-ja has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden said Thursday that a U.S. offensive against the Houthis will continue, as he noted that the Yemeni rebel group has not stopped their attacks against commercial ships in the Red Sea. The comments come as the U.S. conducted a fifth round of strikes on Yemen on Thursday after a U.S. ship was attacked by a Houthi drone. Washington says the string of attacks against the rebel group were defensive in nature and that it does not seek war. Amid growing conflict between Iran and Pakistan, the White House says the U.S. does not want to see an escalation in clashes between the two countries. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said Thursday that it does not want to see an escalation in South and Central Asia, adding that the U.S. has been in touch with Pakistan. The conflict began when Iran conducted strikes against militant groups in Pakistan's Balochistan province, which resulted in the deaths of 2 children and injuries to several more people. Pakistan responded with attacks of their own. Over in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected U.S. calls to scale back Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister on Thursday also stressed that Israel categorically opposes the establishment of a Palestinian state after the war. The comment drew ire from Washington, who said the two allies are not on the same page regarding Gaza issues. Meanwhile, the European Parliament called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, but added that it must be conditional on Hamas releasing the hostages it took in the October 7th attacks, as well as the full demilitarization of Gaza. Responding to the passage of the vote, Israel's ambassador to the EU said Israel is happy to see that the European Parliament understands the need to release the hostages and disarm Hamas before any ceasefire. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
Winter is far from being over in South Korea's Gangwon, where over 1,800 young athletes from 79 countries have made it for the Gangwon 2024 Winter Youth Olympic Games. The 2-week-long winter competition begins today. We're joined by sports writer Yoo Ji-ho. Hello there.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So you are over in Gangwon. How are things looking there? Full of excitement, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was here first actually last week, and I got here back again on Thursday, and you're going to see a lot of banners promoting this event. You're going to see a lot of the Mungcho, the mascots all over the city. So there's a lot of excitement around Gangwon, ready to host their, I guess, the second Olympic Games after Pyeongchang 2018, 6 years ago.
Right, and this is the first time the Winter Youth Olympic Games are being held in a non-European country, isn't it?
It is. Austria, Norway, and Switzerland hosted the first 3 editions of the Winter Youth Olympics, and South Korea, of course, the first Asian country, first non-European country to do so. And also, it is the largest ever, with just over 1,800 athletes from 79 countries, and they've been coming in the last a few days to start training, and they've given high marks on the venues and their accommodation as well. So and also the fact that they're going to be competing a lot of the same Olympic venues that were used 6 years ago. So there's a good use, I guess, the reuse of the former facilities that maybe were in some parts being abandoned for a bit. They're back in use for these young athletes in the next couple of weeks.
Right. As far as I know, there'll be 7 sports and 15 disciplines at this year's event. And like you mentioned, the venues that were used for the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics will be reused again. Let's talk more about those venues.
Sure. It is important for the Olympic host cities now to be able to make some use of their facilities. Otherwise, they end up turning into white elephants, if you will. And I think we've seen some examples of that in some of the recent Olympics, winter and summer. But now, Gangwon province, once again, they're going to be making good use of those facilities. And also for the young athletes, it's going to be a really unique experience for them because, 6 years ago, they're maybe in their, kind of elementary school ages. They were young, aspiring Olympic athletes. And they were watching, these Olympic athletes compete in South Korea. And now they're going to be competing on the same ice, same slope, same tracks, and same sheets that their favorite athletes once competed. So it's going to be a really cool experience for them to be able to share that kind of bond with the athletes that they grew up watching, that they were being inspired by.
Definitely very inspirational and also a cool opportunity for them to, visit Korea where the 2018 editions took place. And what's noticeably different about the youth competition is that it's not a medal race, right?
Right. They do hand out medals, physical medals, but the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, does not officially keep track of the medal race. That's the big difference between the youth edition and I guess also the senior edition of the Olympic Games. The focus here in these youth games is really on forging friendships, getting to know other teenage athletes from different countries, and also having these international athletes come to a host country and learn their culture. So there's a lot of Korean cultural events, festivals, and interactive opportunities for these athletes to learn more about Korean culture. So that's really the focus, where the focus is. Now, these are athletes, they're competitive by nature, but I guess they try to kind of tone it down a little bit because the focus is on, different aspects of the event.
Right, competitive in nature, but still, any Korean athletes that stand out or are expected to excel, what do you think, Jiho?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're the host countries and they want to do well, obviously, before home crowd. And I think some athletes that we're going to keep an eye on would be in figure skating, Shin Ji-ah, who's been really excelling at the junior level. She's been winning a lot of medals internationally at the junior level. So she's going to try to do well in front of the home crowd. And also a couple of snowboarders for Korea, Choi Ga-won and Lee Chae-woon. Also, they've got some international medals to their credit, with Lee Chae-woon being the first Korean snowboard world champion from March last year. So, and their competition is actually on the very last day of this event, on the 1st of February. So there's going to be some excitement building up toward that finish, and hopefully they're going to be able to cap off the memorable Olympics on home soil.
I'm sure they will. All right, Jiho, thanks so much for connecting with us this morning. You stay warm there and enjoy the games.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
South Korea's trade ministry has shifted its funding plans for R&D projects towards bigger and riskier projects rather than those smaller in scale. Moon Hae-ryun explains.
Funding for industry research and development will now be centered around high-risk, high-return projects, as well as fostering future talent. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy held a roundtable session on Thursday to announce how it would spend its portion of the 2024 R&D budget, which is around a fifth of the country's total R&D budget. 70% will be allocated to provide support in 11 key sectors, such as the semiconductor industry, which has recently begun to show signs of recovery. This equates to around 1.3 trillion Korean won, or just under $970 million for the government, but a total of 2 trillion won of public and private funding will be given to 40 projects in these sectors this year. Continuing with the overarching theme of concentrating efforts towards select projects, the government will also increase support to develop what it has dubbed game-changer technology. To do this, the Industry Ministry has pledged to set aside 10% of its annual budget to support high-risk projects to solve industry issues. In addition, it aims to reduce small-scale projects and focus instead on those on a larger scale to maximize market performance, and to do this, it will be expanding the number of projects worth more than 10 billion won from 57 last year to 160 projects this year, by combining those with similar research goals. A new methodology to assign research and development projects will be implemented this year to give companies and researchers a more active role. The government will present goals that need to be achieved, and companies and researchers can lead the project planning process, where they can form a consortium and allocate research funds among themselves. Another key area in which funding will be raised is nurturing future talent, by increasing the number of graduate school programs in new industry areas, such as chips, batteries and displays, from the current 3 to 11 this year. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have welcomed an agreement by their leading national laboratories to cooperate in the field of quantum technology. This came as the head of Seoul National University, the University of Chicago, and the University of Tokyo met in Davos on Thursday and signed a letter of intent to begin a three-way partnership on academic exchanges and joint research. Issuing a joint statement soon after, National Security Advisors Chang Ho-jin, Jake Sullivan, and Takeo Akiba said this innovative partnership will bring tangible benefits by training a quantum workforce and strengthening collective competitiveness in the global economy. Following their Camp David summit last August, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan have been working towards scientific cooperation, signing a three-way agreement in December. Seoul's top office says going forward, it will continue pursuing summit diplomacy to gain tangible benefits for the South Korean people. The future of artificial intelligence is high up on the agenda at the annual general meeting of the World Economic Forum. And at the Davos Forum on Thursday, there was a discussion and debate on AI's potential and risks, with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman attending as a panelist. Altman said that while we expect AI to handle all tasks with speed and precision, it cannot be compared to humans. He also stressed that we need to understand that AI can make mistakes and understand its limitations. This year's meeting in Davos has been focused on ethics, policies, and the regulation of AI.
Good morning, I'm Kim Xiang, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in Singapore, where the country's former Minister for Transport, S. Iswaran, was charged with corruption on Thursday. Iswaran had been arrested last July, but remained as minister until his resignation on Tuesday. In the city-state that prides itself with having a clean government, he would have been the country's first sitting minister to be charged with a criminal offence. Singapore's anti-graft agency, the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, said that Iswaran faces 27 charges for allegedly obtaining kickbacks worth almost $290,000 from Malaysian property tycoon Ong Beng Seng in exchange for advancing Ong's business interests, such as Formula One Singapore Grand Prix. Iswaran allegedly accepted bribes, including flights on Ong's private plane, luxury hotel stays, and tickets to musicals and sports events. He denies all charges. If convicted, Iswaran faces fines of up to $75 or up to 7 years in prison. Now moving over to Japan, where the country's defense ministry signed a deal with the US on Thursday to purchase up to 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles amid growing threats from China. Defense Minister Kihara Minoru and the US Ambassador Rahm Emanuel oversaw the signing of the contract in Tokyo for the multi-billion-dollar deal. The purchase follows Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's adoption of a new security strategy in December 2022, where he pledged to double annual defense spending to around $68 billion through 2027. If executed, this would make Japan the world's third largest military spender after the US and China. Japan plans to complete the deployment of Tomahawk missiles by 2027. Now to the United Kingdom, where lawmakers on Wednesday voted in favour of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's bill to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Prime Minister managed to overcome rebellion from the Conservative Party members, which hindered previous efforts to pass the bill, with the legislation passing 320 to 276. The bill had been heavily scrutinised over fears of human rights breaches, but with immigration a crucial issue for Britain, Sunak has made stopping asylum seekers arriving in small boats a priority for his government. Under the plan, migrants who illegally arrive in the UK will be sent some 6,400 kilometres away to Rwanda to have their asylum claims processed. The bill is yet to be approved by the House of Lords. Lastly, to the US, where New York City and eastern states are expecting further snowfall on Friday as an Arctic air mass brings colder temperatures into the weekend. The National Weather Service reported potential snowfall across the region starting on Friday of between 2.5 and 13 centimeters. In New York City, where earlier this week a 701-day drought of measurable snow was broken with 4 to 5 centimeters of snow on Tuesday, heavy snowfall of up to 8 centimeters may be seen. New York City's Emergency Management Department has issued a travel advisory for Friday.
Good morning. It almost felt like spring was right around the corner yesterday for the capital area. And the warming trend should continue today and into the weekend with snow in the forecast for the east of Gangwon province. And until tomorrow, mountainous regions in Gangwon could see more than 30 centimeters of snowfall with a heavy snow advisory issued there. Those in East Coast regions need to brace for heavy snow through the weekend. Now, speaking of Gangwon, where the Winter Youth Olympic Games will take place for the next 2 weeks, the weather today looks to be a snowy one for Pyeongchang and Gangneung, and it will be freezing cold all day in Pyeongchang, so have a thicker jacket on. Much of the country, however, will have highs that are warmer than norms with good air quality nationwide. It will be rather cloudy in many places all day today. As tomorrow marks Taehan, a period of major cold in the seasonal calendar, the weather will follow the term next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.